As we make our way through Lent, we've been considering 5 different things that can help feed our faith, that can help make our spirits stronger. We looked at worship and prayer. And we challenged ourselves that week to find 5 times every day to spend time on prayer. Adam Hamilton suggests that we focus on praying for each of the 3 meals and in connecting with God first thing in the morning, just as we're crawling out of bed and as we're settling in for the night. But it doesn't have to be those 5. It can be any 5 that you want. Just the point is to begin building into your heart and your life times for connection. Times to open your heart, open your eyes, open yourself to God's presence in the world. Last week we talked about study, and I said what Hamilton says, that studying is really about paying attention. It's about paying attention to what's printed on the pages of the Bible. I mean, really looking, taking into account the context, which includes the time that book was written, the people to whom the author was speaking, what's happening in their lives. Why is it that God inspired this person to set before them this particular message? And as we come to understand that, we're able to take the next step of applying that word for that time to our time. But we have to pay attention. Pay attention not only to what's in the Word, because that's not the only way God can speak, but pay attention to what's going on in our world. Pay attention as we're driving down the street, or better yet, walking wherever our feet take us that week. Who's around us? Are they excited? Are they troubled? What's God saying to us as we glance at the side of the road, as we look at the rising of the sun, as we watch the clouds move across the sky? What is God trying to say as the early flowers of spring begin to bloom? What is God trying to show us? Pay attention. Study. In order that you might understand better what it is God has for you to do in the world. Today we want to talk about a third building block, a third practice that can help our faith to sink deep, to draw in the nourishment that we need to become strong in our faith. I'm calling this one learning to become who we really are. You see, that this journey of faith that we're on is really about coming to understand and grow into the person that God saw in us as we breathed in our first breath. The journey of faith and life is about becoming that person that God intended us to be, that God created us to be. Paul, as he writes to the Ephesians in chapter 2, verse 10, challenges them that they were created to do good works. He challenges them to walk in the good works for which they were created. God always intended that you do something good, that your life begin to make a difference in your family, in your church, in your community. God always intended that you would be one whose life means something. Not only to yourself, but to those around you. Living into this faith, this journey that we're on, this walk that we're taking during the season of Lent, is about worship, about connection. In fact, it's with connection that faith begins. And it's with regular, consistent connection that faith deepens and grows. It's about paying attention, about studying. So that we can understand who God is, who we are, what this world is all about, and why that's important. But it's also about learning to be who we are, learning to serve God and one another. Some of you know, many of you know maybe, that I have been involved in a continuing education opportunity at the conference level this last month. We have one more session. Early in the morning on a Monday, I fly to Seattle. Spend the day there with about a dozen other pastors in the conference and a person that the conference has brought in to try to teach and train and encourage us to be all that we can be as pastors, as leaders here. Last trip to Seattle, right at the end of February. I hopped on the plane at about just before 7 o'clock in the morning. And I just settled in my seat and fastened the seatbelt, and down the aisle came a husband and a wife and 4 young kids. Husbands settled in, 4 young children. Husband settled in beside me. One of the sons and a young daughter were behind, and the wife and the other child were across the aisle from us. And I heard the voices behind me. Is the next plane going to be bigger, Daddy? Is the next plane going to be bigger? And I turned to the fellow and I said, so, where are you guys off to? And he said, we're going to Arizona for spring training. It's kind of a family thing. We do it every year. Kids look forward to it. This year we're going to stay a little longer. We've set aside 5 days, taking the older ones out of school. Said, see, they're really getting excited about this baseball thing. And they're looking forward to talking to some of the players and getting their autographs and finding out as much as they can about what it's like to play this game, baseball. And I couldn't help but think, as I was pondering this lesson, I knew it was coming. You know, you can know baseball. You can know it well. You can know the signs that they give to tell the base runners whether to run or hold, or that the catcher gives the pitcher to tell what pitch to throw next. You can study the motions of the pitcher, the way that person stands on the mound. You can learn. I was told one of the most important lessons for a pitcher is to learn to throw with your legs and not your arms. I remember as our son Danny was learning to pitch, I passed that on to him, and he said, "What do you mean by that, Dad?" And I said, you got to push off and begin getting some momentum before you start bringing your arm around, some movement, some power. The power comes not just from your arm, but from your legs. You have to learn that rhythm. You have to watch how they do that. And you can watch and you can learn how to do that. You can learn how to grip the ball for the different pitches that you throw, the fastball, the knuckleball, curveball, split finger. But you'll never be a pitcher until you stand on the mound yourself, grip the baseball, rear back, and throw. You can have a connection with Jesus Christ. You can understand what it is to worship. You can pay attention and learn so many things about this journey and this faith. But until you step into service, you've not yet become all that God dreamed you might be. You're not yet a Christian. Hamilton says, if you want to know what a Christian is really supposed to be doing, look at what Jesus did. How did he fill his time? What seemed to be priorities for him? And you don't have to read very far into the gospel accounts until you begin to notice that Jesus' priority was the people he came across on his daily journey. Jesus' priority was serving. And so there in Matthew chapter 20, when the mother of James and John came to Jesus with a special request, "I want to ask you something special," she said. "I'm a little anxious about this, but I really want to ask you a special favor. When you come into your kingdom, I'm hoping that my sons, James and John, will be on your left and on your right." Jesus looked at her and said, "Ma'am, you don't know what you're asking, do you? You don't know what you're asking." And he looked at James and John and he said, "Are you telling me that you're ready to travel this journey that I'm on? That you're ready to step into my shoes? That you're ready to be that right-hand person? That one at my side, ready to take over and step into this ministry that God has given me?" They said, "Well, yes, we are." And Jesus said, "Well, truth is, folks, you will be there. But I have to tell you, a place at my right and my left is not mine to give." Well, overhearing all of this, the other 10 disciples are angry. They're angry because because it sounds to them as if Jesus has just given a place of honor to 2 of their company, of their members. A place that they were hoping to have for themselves. Maybe they're angry because they were hoping that this special favorite place might be a place for all of them to share, not just 2. But as they have overheard bits and pieces of this dialogue with the mother, Mrs. Zebedee, the mother of James and John, and about her hope that her sons could be in a place of special honor. And Jesus talking about and saying, you will have a special place. You will step into my shoes. But maybe they missed the part about that place just to my right and my left. It's not mine to give. Well, Jesus, as he perceives, and maybe it wasn't very hard to perceive it, their anger, looks at them and says, now wait a minute. Now, just wait a minute. You don't understand either. Because to be all that God hoped you might become does not mean grabbing at power. Does not mean grabbing for power. So much of the world around us is an almost tireless grasping for position, for influence, for honor. Just like the disciples. And Jesus says to them, you don't understand. He would say to us, you don't understand. God's dream for you has nothing to do with who's the tallest, who's the strongest, who's the richest. It has nothing to do with things this world offers. God's dream for you, God's purpose for me, he says, is to serve others. I have come to serve others. If you would really follow me, you would be those who build your life around service to other people. This Christian life of ours, this journey of faith, is all about meeting the needs of other people. The only interesting thing about that is, as someone mentioned in the men's group that has been meeting on Saturday mornings, when we do reach out and we know in our heart that we have served and met the needs of someone else, something gets all warm inside of us. We feel fulfilled. We feel worthy. We feel blessed. Because it's true, you see, that our purpose in this Christian walk is to become the people that God dreamed we might be. And the people God dreamed we might be are those who serve, those who reach out, those who do acts of kindness and compassion that leave the world a better place. Now, just what it is that God would have you do, that I'm not necessarily clear about. It will be something that is compatible with your gifts and graces. It'll be something that's needed in the community where you are. My specific service has not always been the same in the churches that I've served. But it's always been consistent with gifts that God has given me. It's been consistent with the needs of that community to which God has sent me, thanks to the bishop. And it's always been to, in some way, make a difference in the lives of other people. And in doing so, make a difference in my own life. Service is all about becoming the people that God dreamed we might become. Service is all about doing something good for others. Hamilton suggests that as we travel this next week, wherever that journey takes us, and there have been some limitations on where that might be and what that might be just by this whole COVID-19 virus phenomenon. But still, there's some uncertainty. Will it be to a 45-minute wait for the checkout at the grocery store? Or an hour wait to step into Costco? Will it be hours and hours cooped up in four walls that begin to feel like a prison? Wherever it is, this week takes us, there will be opportunities to serve. Opportunities to do something good for someone else. Hamilton challenges us, and I would challenge you, not only this week, to connect with God 5 times every day. Something as simple as the 3 meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner. First thing in the morning as you rise to greet the new day, and last thing at night as you settle in. Not only are you paying attention and taking in all that's happening in this world around you, and taking in 5 verses from Scripture every day. Takes less than a minute. And pay attention to where that leads you, to what's going on in those passages to which God's Spirit will direct you. Not only do you do those 2 things, but before we're together again in this way, before you sit down in front of that screen and listen to what I want to share with you next week, you've done 5 random acts of kindness. 5 random acts of kindness. Sometimes there's great challenge in doing an act of kindness, but it will always involve paying attention to what's going on around you. Sometimes paying attention as your life is interrupted by another. Sometimes just paying attention to what's really going on in the life of another person. Seminary years, 2 out of 3 years in Atlanta, I paid my rent and bought my food by working in the Emory University cafeteria. I served on the line, spoon in hand, putting those mashed potatoes on the plate, grabbing big dishes, big roasting pans out of the warmer and setting them on the steam table, and making the coffee. And I was one of 3 white faces on that serving line. most days. One of the cashiers, they had two, was often a white person. And one of the people in charge of the operation that day, the shift leader, was a white person, and then there was me. Every other face was black. I remember one evening, the cafeteria in those days connected to a hallway that led to Emory University Hospital. Emory University Hospital was a place that, unless you were very, very wealthy or very, very sick, you didn't go as a patient. They had highly specialized care there. And one evening there was a family that came through those doors, down that hallway, through those doors into the cafeteria, and they were coming for something to eat. They got on the line. We were serving different fish items that night, and one of them was scallops. So, what would you like? Well, I'll have some of the potatoes, and I'll have some of the green beans, and yes, I'd like some scallops, and then this piece of fish. And I spooned on the scallops and the fish, and taken only a couple steps down the line, and this guy is hot. He is angry. He says, "I thought you were serving scallops." Well, yes, sir, we are. Well, why didn't you put scallops on my plate? Well, but I did. I pointed. Those are scallops. This pan is scallops. Honest. Those are not scallops. So I'm really upset, and I there's an intercom down to the kitchen. The kitchen's on a lower level, and I call down and I say, "Hey, did you substitute something for scallops?" Because sometimes they would do that. "No, those are scallops." And I said, "Do you have any boxes that this came from?" And they said, "Well, yeah, we got, yeah." So I took the elevator down. I came back up with this box that said scallops, and I showed it to this fellow, and I said, "See, scallops. This is what was in that box. These are honest. These are scallops." He was having none of it. He was fussing and fuming and angry. I set off to find the person who was in charge of that shift. She was down in her office, and Ms. Cooper. And I said, Miss Cooper, this guy, I don't know what to do with this guy. I offered to give him his money back. He doesn't want his money back. He wants his scallops." The poor gal at the cash register is just beside herself, because after he's had his meltdown with me, he's down just chewing on her about how unfair and awful. And I'm having a conversation with the gal who's at the cash register a little bit later, and she says, "What is with that guy? What in the world is going on?" And it hit me. I looked at her and I said, I did notice that whole family came in from the hospital. I'm wondering if someone they love very much is facing an overwhelming health challenge. I wonder if they've got a loved one who's dying. If they've got somebody that is struggling to find their way back from open heart surgery or severe kidney disease or a liver that just won't work right anymore. I wonder if all of that angst and anger is not really about scallops, but about an overwhelming challenge. And I wish I could tell you that I went over and talked to that fellow and began to resolve things. Frankly, I didn't. But here's the point. Paying attention and trying to serve is going to ask us to go a second mile, a third mile. Jesus talked about that. And to try to understand what really is going on in the life of that person who crosses your path in an angry or spiteful way could open the door toward being able to serve them. And it's serving them that God calls us to do. Hamilton did an interesting thing with numbers in his book and in his video. And you'll see that this week, maybe, as you're able to be together or as you read through this chapter. He said, the average United Methodist Church has 50 people on a Sunday. Made me feel pretty good. Last year, we averaged 70 here at West Highlands United Methodist. Average Methodist Church, 50. We're above average. Often we feel well below average. But anyway, he said, 50 people in church doing 5 random acts of kindness. That's 250 acts of kindness every week. If we were to do that for 52 weeks, 13,200 random acts of kindness right here in our community by just a church of 50 people. We have 70. That's over 18,000 random acts of kindness every year. Is there anything about that that doesn't convince you that in serving others as Jesus calls us to do, we couldn't change our world, our community, our neighborhood? We couldn't really make a difference for other folks? And in doing so, continue to make a difference in us. Doing is another step on this journey of faithfulness that God calls us to. There's connecting. And if we don't have a connection, then we don't have life. There's studying, noticing, paying attention, which opens up opportunities that we might otherwise miss. But if we don't actually act on those opportunities, then those who cross our path will miss a blessing, and so will we.